It might be windy or hilly. You're new to triathlon. You're on an entry-level TT bike, or you could be absolutely obsessed with aerodynamics and marginal gains. There are so many different variations of athletes and courses, but today we hope to cover all the different scenarios so you can work out what depth of wheel to choose for your next race. As much as we want to delve into all the different scenarios and the appropriate wheel depths for each, we also get that most of you are not going to have a garage full of wheels of different depths that you can simply pull off the rack and put on your racing steed. If, however, you're researching it and you're looking at potentially buying a new set of wheels, or you're looking at hiring or borrowing, then we are here for you. Before we crack on with the nitty-gritty and look at all of the different options, just a quick reminder, if you want to support the channel, we would love it if you subscribe. You can do that by just clicking on the globe. The choice available is huge. You've got the basic shallow wheel all the way through to a full disc for the rear or a tri-spoke on the front, and all sorts in between. Wheel manufacturers have increased their offerings significantly over the last few years, meaning you're spoilt for choice, but it does mean that making that choice has become somewhat more challenging. Well, we will take a look at all the different factors to consider and how much weighting each area should have. But first, I want to talk about you. How big or heavy are you? Now, I'm not here to judge, but when you're riding in strong winds, the heavier you are, the more you'll be able to control deeper depth wheels. Basically, the heavier the combination between you and your bike, the more stable it will be in those windy conditions. Now, take Kona, for example, back when the men and the women used to race on the same course at the World Championships. If you look at the pro field, you'll notice that some of the pro women will have shallower wheel sets than the average in the men's field. Sticking with you, and something that is easier to change, albeit with a bit of work, is your riding skills. If you're new to cycling or you're a bit of a nervous rider, then you'll want to go for a shallower depth wheel that won't move your bike so much when you hit a gust. Now, if you are able to ride through those gusts with deeper wheels, but it takes up a lot of energy, you have to just consider the bigger picture. Yes, you might get off the bike a little bit quicker, a bit earlier, but if it's taken out a lot of fatigue, both physically and mentally, from you holding on and being nervous, then you have to weigh up those benefits. But maybe you're at the other end of the spectrum and you're totally comfortable riding your bike, whatever the wind direction, whatever the speed of the wind, and you can pedal through those gusts and stay relaxed, then that shows that probably a deeper wheel will be better for you. And finally, how fast are you? Now, in fact, the faster you're moving, the less the effect of the crosswind, because the force of you moving forwards will be bigger than the force coming sideways. So it basically makes you more stable. And this is a strange equation because it's part confidence and part power. Onto the course itself, and talking about how fast and how skilled you are, I think we should talk about hills. And the biggest question to answer around hills is which should take priority, weight or aerodynamics? And it's a rather annoying answer. It depends how hilly the bike course is, and by that we don't purely mean the amount of meters of elevation, but actually the amount of the course that is over a certain gradient. For the pros, that gradient is around a 7.5% to 8%. Anything over that, that's when you want to have lighter wheels and aerodynamics becomes less of a factor. But obviously the slower you're riding, the lower that gradient will be for it to actually have an effect. So it's very much athlete dependent and something we can't give you an exact number for. Then you also want to consider how technical it is and look at the descent. Is it a really fast, or is it really twisty and turny and quite a difficult, challenging one? Or is it long, sweeping, quite gradual descents where you'll want to have more of an aerodynamic gain? We're not going to go through every scenario, we can't, but these are things that you need to consider. And you could take an example looking at the pros of the 70.3 Ironman World Championships when they were held in Nice, and a certain pro, well, Gustav Iden, who went on to win it, chose to ride a road bike over a TT bike. But that's a whole conversation for another day, I digress. Well, let's be frank, the deeper the wheels, the heavier they are, with the disc wheels being the heaviest. So you then have to work out how much of the course you're going to actually have the aerodynamic gain, where the weight isn't going to be an issue, compared to how much you want lighter wheel and the aerodynamic gain is less of an effect. So it's a bit of a ratio that you're going to have to figure out yourself. And it isn't as simple as just looking at the course profile and going, well, it's got X amount of elevation, I'm going to choose X wheels, because like we said earlier, the types of hills will vary. So if there's lots of shallow hills compared to a really steep climb, it's going to be two different wheels. And then you also need to think about the descending and back to your skills again, because if you're quite a nervous descender and you're going to be on your brakes for most of the time, then obviously there's no need to have any aerodynamic advantage from your wheels. So a shallow wheel would be fine. Compared to someone that might be really going for it, then you do want that aerodynamic benefit, and the weight is less of an issue. And finally, although less common on non-drafting long distance triathlons, is the actual course itself, of whether it's got any really sharp turns or any junctions where you're going to have to really reduce your speed and then get back up to speed, because a disc wheel will require more energy for you to get back up to that speed, yet you'll get that return once you're back at your velocity. Well, I told you there was a lot to consider, and I hope that I've not overwhelmed you with all of the different scenarios. But at the end of the day, we are all different. We're riding different bikes on different courses with different skill ability. But now you at least know what you need to think about when considering your wheel choice. And I think it's time to delve a little deeper into the actual choices available. And for that, we need to go and find a few more wheels. On the whole, triathlon bikes are ridden with wheels that start as shallow as 40 mils and go all the way up through the spectrum. Now, you don't really want to have anything any more shallow than this, because if you've gone to the effort, or I should say the money, of getting a triathlon bike, well, you don't want to be losing those aero gains by having super shallow wheels. So let's call the 40 mil deep wheel a shallow wheel, if you're with me. And this is shallow enough that it should mitigate any issues that you'd have with handling and wind, etc., that we've talked about earlier, as well as obviously being on the lighter end of things. You go to wheels that are roughly around 60 mil in depth, and they are known as mid-depth wheels, such as this one. And then finally, you go to the deeper wheels, which tend to be around 80 mil in depth, and surprise, surprise, they are deep section wheels. And if you do go much deeper than that, in most brands, it means you're moving on to a disc wheel, but more on that in a moment. And of course, within that, you can mix and match. Now, if you see anyone riding a disc wheel, obviously they're going to have a shallower wheel on the front. And even within that, you can mix and match the wheels. So the setup that this Canyon actually came with, is obviously, as you can see, has a deeper on the back and a shallower wheel on the front for making it easier for handling. Well, there is actually science behind these odd pairings. The rear wheel is naturally much more stable, as more of your weight is over the back of the bike, and gusts or strong winds will be felt far more on the front, especially if you're riding on the aero bars. So this gives you scope to make the most of aerodynamics with a deeper rear wheel, even if you're not so confident in those windier conditions. So basically the choice is yours, unless that is you are racing in Kona, where the disc wheel is banned due to the high winds. But it's probably worth mentioning on that note that last year we saw another wheel depth on the market, as Head came out with 180 mil depth rear wheel to get around those rules, and that was launched just ahead of the Ironman World Champs last October. But I don't know how much we'll see of that on the market. And I probably should also mention the 4-spoke wheel, which we're seeing Christian Blumenfeld riding at the moment on his K-Dex. So yeah, the options are pretty endless. Well, I think we've covered pretty much all depths of wheels, or at least the principle around the most common depths. So it's up to you to make that decision, although you will also have to factor in cost, which is a pretty big thing when it comes to choosing wheels, and technical developments, as well as some other features. Some brands now have wheels that have dimples on that are supposed to be better for aerodynamics, or serrated edges that are going to help in crosswinds. But that is most certainly a conversation for another day. At the end of the day, you need to find some wheels that are going to allow you to ride strongly and efficiently on your bike, and basically aid the aerodynamics that you already have. So good luck with that choice. If you've recently bought a new set of wheels, do let us know what you've got and why you've gone for them. You can do that in the comment section below. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Give us a like.